So sit back and rest assured you never have to miss a single moment with Ideal Extra.
Well, a very, very good afternoon to you and welcome to today's show. It is a whole hour dedicated to legacy probate services. Now, we're talking about some very serious subjects today, and it's something that could be given a great deal of attention, as approximately 2/3 of adults in the UK have made no plans for this. So what am I talking about? It's end-of-life planning. This is a subject most people don't like to think about, but failure to plan for this can cause your family a great deal of pain and heartache at an incredibly difficult time. We're asking the question, have you made a will? What you may not realise, and what I didn't realise, is there's so much more to consider than perhaps a simply worded will describes. After the next hour, you'll see that this is something you should seriously consider now. So today we are talking to Legacy Probate Services, a well-established provider will planning solutions. But before we explain just how simple and affordable this is to protect and look after your loved ones, let's hear from the Managing Director, Andy Townsend, who will tell you about the company and how they will be looking after you today.
My name's Andy Townsend and I'm the Managing Director of Legacy Probate Services Limited. What I'd like to do is just spend a couple of moments of my time just explaining who we are and what we do. Well, first of all, let me tell you a little bit more about me. My background is having spent 25 years in the financial services industry, dealing with private clients of my own, and in the latter years, training and recruiting other specialists to this industry. Now, over this period of time, I have seen and heard many horror stories from our clients about family members and friends of theirs who have died and have had severe problems with their estate following this. So I decided to do something about it, and in 2002 set a family business up with my father to be able to give clients impartial and quality advice. Now, we grew and established ourselves very quickly, and our reputation in the market for giving quality advice to clients, and in 2004 became incorporated as Platinum Wills Limited. Now, at this time we needed to recruit several more staff, and we moved into office premises in Lincoln. Our business exceeded all of our expectations, and in 2010 we invited Ian Peace to our board of directors, someone who I worked with very closely for the last 15 years. At this time, we rebranded our name to Legacy Probate Services Limited, a name which we thought was more akin to what we do, which is to protect our clients' legacy. To date, we have now over 80,000 clients and written over 80,000 wills, and stand as one of the largest independent will writing companies in the UK. Our offices still remain in Lincoln, but we also now have new offices on Welford Road in Leicester. Now, in a moment we'll be meeting Ian Peace and also Helen Hill, who is our Legal Services Director. Now, Helen is well renowned in this industry and is fully STEP qualified, which is one of the most recognised qualifications that can be gained in this area.
Now, as Andy has just said there, I love the Andy Townsend, that our Legal Sales Director, Helen Hill, is with us. It's lovely to have you here, Helen.
Nice
so lovely to meet you. And we've also got our Sales Director, Ian Peace. Hello, Ian. It's lovely to see you here.
Hello.
You may know Ian. He's been on a few of our shows now already, so it's lovely to have both of your companies here. Now, both Helen and Ian will be telling us more about the importance of having a valid will in place. And they'll also be explaining the benefits of trust and lasting powers of attorney. These are all about documents documents that your family and loved ones are protected and looked after as you would wish. So hello to both of you. It's lovely to have your company. Now, if you do want to get in touch, of course, you can do. This is the phone number, 0345 520 8000, I should say. Now, open until 7 o'clock today. You do need to quote Ideal 101 when you make that call, of course. And there's a different website as well to our usual. It is legacywillwriters.co.uk/TV. So that's 0345 520 8000. Now, of course, the lovely people are waiting at the call centre to take your call. And we're going to go back to Andy at the call centre just to have a chat to some of the people you may be talking about. It's two of the experts over there at the call centre in Leicester. So take a look at this.
Well, as you can see, this is our call centre, and it's an absolute hive of activity down here. What I'd like you to do is introduce you to our call centre manager, Dan Stevenson. So, hi, Dan.
Hi there.
So, can I just ask, what are you expecting from today's show?
Yeah, I'm expecting the show to be very busy. When it does come to wills, from my experience, clients always will have a question, whether it's about their family members or even themselves. Our trained team are on hand to answer any of those questions, so please don't hesitate to give us a call.
Fantastic. So, are you ready for today's show?
Yeah, we're ready for the show. Like I said, we've got the team on hand, ready to answer any questions. If anybody needs any further clarity or any questions answered, please don't hesitate to give us a call. We're here to help.
That's brilliant. Looking forward to that, and I'm sure you'll be getting a call during the show to see how things are going.
OK, fantastic. Look forward to it.
So this is our specialist team that will be taking your calls today, and every one of them are well trained and well qualified to answer any questions you may have. So first of all, let's meet Lauren. So hi, Lauren.
Hello.
So can you tell me a little bit about your background?
Yeah, of course I can. I did 4 A-levels, completed them quite a few years back now, and then went on to do my law degree, graduating in September of last year. I'm also an associate of the Institute of Professional Will Writers, which is our governing body, and I'm now looking to pursue a career to be a legal executive to specialise as a probate practitioner and also a licensed conveyancer.
That's fantastic. So when did you start with Legacy Probate Services?
Started last November.
Right, OK. And do you enjoy it?
Absolutely love it, yeah. I love speaking to clients. Every client's different. But not only that, it's really nice to know that at the end of the day you're dealing with a client and that their wishes will be met, but not only that, that they're looking after their families as well.
That's brilliant, that's brilliant. So Lauren and the rest of the team will be taking your calls today, and if you have any questions, no matter how strange or trivial they may feel, don't worry about it, just ring in and give us a call.
Well, that's the lovely Dan and Lauren, of course, some of the experts that will be taking your calls right now and until 7 o'clock tonight as well. Now, we have got flexible payments available as well. Ian, I'm going to come to you first because this is from as little as just £21.50 per month.
Yeah, it's, we want to make it as affordable as possible and accessible as possible to clients out there. It's crazy prices, really. It's,
absolutely.
It's very affordable.
It
so
is very affordable.
Hopefully people are going to pick up the phone. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Ian, tell me, essentially, we're covering today's show as why a will is so important.
Yeah.
But then we'll also be talking about how a will can do so much more with the inclusion of trusts. So that's a lot to talk about, isn't it?
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, what we're going to cover today, all being well, is wills aren't a very exciting thing to a lot of people. But hopefully what we'll be able to get across to people today is it can be so much more than just a piece of paper where you write down, I want my watch to go to my son.
Exactly.
You can do a lot more with a will than I think a lot of people realise, and some of that goes a long way to protecting their assets as well. So we're going to be discussing that today.
Now, Helen, I'm going to come to you because we are talking about something else as well, because everyone's looking forward to learning so much more here today, and I've definitely learned more just chatting to before the show as well. We're not just going to be talking about wills, though, are we? We're going to be talking about something called lasting power of attorney. So what's this all about?
That's right. As Ian said, the will and the trust that we'll be talking about today is end-of-life planning, whereas a lasting power of attorney is a very important legal document that assists you during your lifetime. So if you're ever in a position where you can't manage your own assets for whatever reason, you can appoint someone you know and trust who can take on that role for you.
And that, I think, you know, might sort of ring true for a lot of people. It certainly does with me. I was telling the story that somebody in my family had that problem and didn't have a lasting power of attorney, and I can tell you it gets pretty difficult. So what Legacy Services have done have brought together a team of professional industry experts experts. Now, this ensures the best technical advice and, of course, the service levels. And you're associated with two industry bodies yourself, Ian, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. We're members of both the Estate Planners Network and the Institute of Professional Will Writers. These are self-regulatory bodies in our industry, in our profession. Their aim really is to raise the standards of everyone operating within this industry. There are stringent entry requirements. They want to make sure that you're insured and basically that you're competent to do the job that you're doing. So it's important that anyone using any of this kind of service make sure that they're regulated in that way.
That's great peace of mind as well, Helen, isn't it? I mean, how does a customer benefit from Legacy being a member of these associations?
Obviously, by being a member of these associations, Legacy has had to comply with their strict entry requirements. So the customer can be reassured that the people that will be carrying out these services for them are suitably qualified, suitably insured, and have reached a level that is acceptable within the industry.
That is fantastic peace of mind, isn't it? You know you are getting something so very, very special here today as well. Now, we're going to go over and talk to Sally Brown. She's the CEO of Legacy. It's the Institute of Professional Will Writers. What does she say about the profession? Take a look at this.
The Institute of Professional Will Writers was formed in 1991 with the aim of setting high standards for individuals and firms in the will writing industry. This came in response of the government's desire to address issues within the unregulated will writing sector, where consumers didn't have anything to measure will writing services against. In 2010, the Institute of Professional Will Writers had its code approved under the Consumer Codes Approval Scheme, which is now run by the Trading Standards Institute. The Institute is now one of the industry's largest representative bodies in the UK, including the Institute of Scottish Professional Will Writers in Scotland. If you want someone to write your will, look for the IPW logo, as you will know that that advisor has professional indemnity up to £2 million. The advisor commits to continuing professional development, meaning that they're always up to date with changes in the law and therefore giving you best practice at all times. The advisor has completed a criminal records check and they have a robust complaints procedure. Importantly, the advisor adheres to the Institute of Professional Will Writers Code of Practice and is therefore recognised by the Trading Standards Institute. The Institute is the only representative body in the will writing sector to have its code approved by the Trading Standards Institute, and our members are rightly proud of that. The Institute of Professional Will Writers wants to safeguard the public against unscrupulous and unprofessional practices, and we can do that by setting high membership criteria and by making the public aware of what to look for, the IPW and TSI logos. The Institute of Professional Will Writers is therefore happy to support our member Legacy Probate Services, highlighting not just the need for a will, but also the need to choose an advisor who is professional and competent.
Oh, what a fantastic endorsement, of course, giving your customers that peace of mind, knowing that, of course, it is endorsed. But we're also going to go a step further because this is about the Estate Planners Network. Now, they have an endorsement as well. I want you to take a look at this because this is very interesting and also giving you peace of mind also. Now, remember, you can call the call centre, of course, 0345 520 8000. Lots of people, I know it's very busy at the moment, so lots of people taking your calls right now. These are the experts. Have a chat to them. That's all you need to do today as well. Lovely people up there also. Let's have a look at that endorsement for you. This, of course, is all about the Estate Planners Network. Now, the Estate Planners Network, or EPN, is a nationwide body created to raise standards within the will and estate planning industry. They give confidence and assurance to customers that whenever they buy from a Estate Planners Network practitioner who bears our logo, they will receive the very best advice and high levels of customer care they would expect. EPN have stringent entry requirements for anybody wishing to join the network. Not all so-called representative bodies carry out these extensive checks. The Estate Planners Network logo should therefore be seen as a sign of assurance to anyone wishing to discuss such important issues like end-of-life planning. Estate Planners Network endorses Legacy Probate Services as one of its members, and as such, any client considering buying from them can do so with confidence. Ian, I think a question maybe a lot of people will be asking themselves right now after hearing what we've said already is, why is it so important to make your own will?
I think there's an understandable there's a lot of myth around wills, and I think a lot of people think that everything's going to be okay. And I don't think people sort of go on a search engine and say, what happens to my estate when I die? So they're not sure what problems are on the horizon. And unfortunately, when someone's passed away, it's only then that those problems actually materialise.
Absolutely.
What a lot of people might not realise is if they don't make their own will, so if they don't make decisions for themselves, they're effectively accepting something called the rules of intestacy, which I call the government will. So effectively, if us three had decided not to write our own will, we'd have exactly the same will provided by one set of rules, which is actually dictated by your... It starts off by asking what your marital status is. So it's quite an old set of rules. It doesn't really suit what people's needs are today. When you make your own will, this won't mean a great deal at this stage, but we'll expand on it as we go through the show, no doubt. But you can choose who administers your estate, so you get to decide who the executors are going to be. So people that you trust will actually carry your wishes out.
Of course.
If you've got children or grandchildren, it can be important to people to know that they're going to inherit at a certain age. Not everyone wants the children to inherit at 18. I saw a picture of myself recently where I was 18. It wasn't pretty. And when I looked at myself, I thought, if I'd got any money at that age, I'm not making the right decision with it. I myself have 2 young boys. I've got Zach, who's 5, and JJ, who's 2. I hope they grow up and are sensible, but to be fair, I want to have a bit of control and make sure that they inherit when it's right for them. Staying with children for a bit, you know, there's guardianship as well. A lot of people don't realise a will isn't just about passing on tangible assets. There's something called parental responsibility when you're parents, and obviously if you're really unlucky, no one wants to think about this particularly, but if you're unlucky and both parents pass away, who looks after your children? It's not an automatic process, but you can decide that in a will as well, so you can nominate guardians as well. And then obviously the fundamental part of a will is you decide who's going to inherit, not a set of rules written by somebody else. So you choose who's going to inherit, also who may not inherit. Sometimes people want to exclude people. Then there's heirlooms. People want to pass things down, so there's specific gifts, there's legacies, there's all that kind of stuff as well. And some people have very, very, very clear ideas of what funeral plans, what funeral wishes they want to have, and so we document things like that, even down to organ donation preference. So the will itself isn't just, I want to leave my cat to my brother. It's much more in-depth than that. And it's really selfless. When someone makes a will, it's really selfless, because what you're doing is you're planning for an inevitability, but at the same time what you're doing is you're making sure that the people that you leave behind, the grief and the sadness isn't added to by having to deal with all these problems, because you've already done it for them. You've told them what you want to happen, and all things being equal, that's what will happen. So that's why it's important.
It is, and I mean, you know, you look at things like that and you think, do I really need one of those? But when you hear what Ian and Helen have to say, I remember when a close member of my family passed away, they didn't leave any arrangements for a funeral, so we had to kind of guess. And it was about 3 months later when I found an envelope, just handwritten of what they wanted, and that was pretty scary opening that, because did we do the right thing? Are we doing the right thing? So that is so, so important, isn't it? It's just things like that. It's for the people who are left behind, isn't it? That's, I think, what's so important. Now, you mentioned that everyone has a default will, and if they don't make their own. So what happens if you pass away without a valid will of your own, Ian?
Well, there is this wonderful set of rules called the rules of intestacy, which, as every UK adult effectively has that as a default will if they don't make their own, as I've sort of already suggested. The problem is, without making any sort of sweeping statements, it's not unusual now for people to be in a relationship that might be the second relationship. So they may be married, they may be not. He may have a child, she may have a child, they might have a child together. And unfortunately, those rules of intestacy are quite sort of linear, and they run to your bloodline. So if you've got not a normal family or a nuclear family, if you like, and
which is a modern way, of course.
A modern way, yeah,
absolutely.
Then those rules they can make a complete mess. There's a very, very quick story. Of a doctor who, this was on the BBC E-magazine, and a doctor unfortunately passed away. He'd never married and he'd never had children, and he'd never made a will. Unfortunately, when he passed away, he fell into the rules of intestacy. The questions that are asked are you married? He'd never married, so the next question, and it takes you to a conclusion, the next question is, did he have any children? And the answer was no. The next question that was asked was, did he have parents? We knew his mum was still alive, but the backstory was that when he was born, this guy that unfortunately passed away, his father actually divorced his mum and disappeared. So the guy that passed away never knew his dad. There was no birthday cards, no connection, no nothing, unfortunately. But the rules of intestacy said that his estate was to be shared equally in equal shares with the parents. So his mum, obviously grief-stricken, then had to track down her ex-husband and say, I know we've not seen each other for decades, our youngest son's passed away and you're entitled to half, and unfortunately the guy accepted it. And that sounds like a horror story, but unfortunately we see it every day. We see both sides of the coin. We help people who've got a will and we help put their plans in place.
Exactly.
And then we help families out as much as we can
Yes.
that haven't planned, and of course that's so much. It seems unfair and people have this belief that that can't be right, and that's an understandable thought. But unfortunately the law is the law, and if you don't make your own will, you're effectively saying I'm happy to have the government will. So whatever that rules of intestacy says is what's going to happen.
So if you're happy to leave other people deal with your affairs, then, you know, so be it. But if you want to have that control, of course, I think this is a really, really important show. One thing I want to ask you, Helen, is that we see a lot of these things about make your own will at home, templates and things like that. So why not just do that? Why not just have a template?
The problem with using a template is that you're not actually taking any advice when you're producing your will.
Right.
So the things that you're actually documenting might not be the best things for you in those circumstances. The problem also with using a kit like that is that you've then got no guidance as to how to complete the correct wording,
Yes,
how
of
to get it
course.
signed up correctly, and we have lots of examples where people have tried to write their own wills, and even the wording itself has led to having to apply to the courts for an interpretation, or the document's been totally invalid simply because it's been signed incorrectly. So it's very important that if you're doing your will, to make sure that you get proper advice at the same time. Use someone who's going to take you through the whole process and make sure it's completed.
Now, there are some fantastic offers as well. You've seen them popping up on the screen during the show also. So you are saving 50% at least on a will here. The prices are incredible. Ian, I'm just going to ask you about wills being updated, because I always think if you make a will, what if things change?
Yeah, I think, you know, we're sort of talking to people who perhaps haven't made a will, but recent statistics show that perhaps a third of UK adults have made a will. But our experience, again, is those were made some time ago, legislation's changed, you know, their own personal circumstances have changed. So anyone that's sat there thinking, well, I've got a will, it's still worth calling in and talking to one of our experts, and we'll review it for them, because it could be that something needs updating and changing, so we can help people that have already got a will. And if there are any changes that they want to make, it's not a problem. We can write a new one that will replace that. It's not a case that you have to go out of your way to cancel a will. You just make a new one, and it automatically supersedes any existing will.
I would have thought that you'd have to go to trouble of cancelling the first will that you made, and then you'd have to go and get a... But you don't have to do any of that.
No.
So it's the newest will is the one that stands.
Correct. Yeah.
Now, you insure every document, don't you, as well?
Yeah. I mean, just circling back to what Helen was saying about people who use DIY kits and templates. Dangerous sounds a bit melodramatic, but if you're going to do a will, you're doing it because you want to look after the people that you leave behind. So this sounds a little bit crass, but if you're going to do a job, do it right.
Yeah,
I don't service my own car, even though I kind of know where the oil goes, but I take it to a mechanic because he knows what he's doing. So hopefully people will go to a professionally qualified will writer to make a will. With that, as we said about the Estate Planners Network and the Institute of Professional Will Writers, we actually carry £5 million with professional indemnity insurance. So anyone that writes a will with us is safe in the knowledge that we don't make mistakes, touch wood, but if we did, it's a fully insured service that we offer.
Fully insured, and you're endorsed by the two professional bodies as well, which I think, again, peace of mind once more. Now, not only that, of course, you've got flexible payments on these. We were absolutely delighted to see this. Let's take a look at all of the details here for you, because this is pretty incredible. So with the will you're looking at there, now the full price for single would be usually £129, and for couples, £189. Now take a look at the Ideal World price with 50% off. That's half price. For a single, it's £64.50. For couples, £94.50. And you can spread these costs with 3 payments of just £21.50 for single, and that is interest-free, and for couples, £31.50. And that's over just 3 payments, and then you're done. That's it. That is this really represents superb value for money, doesn't it, Ian?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think, picking on what you said about make 3 payments and then it's done.
Exactly.
A lot of people put off doing this because they don't necessarily want to face it, but it's 30 minutes of your time. We don't expect viewers to know exactly what they want now, but if they call up now and secure this deal, we'll hold the hand through the whole process. But the value is exceptional, and as you said, when it's done, it's done. You can just put it to the back of your mind then and, you know, and relax and just get on with the rest of your life.
Absolutely, and don't forget you do have those flexible payments, which is a great and interest-free way for you to spread the cost as well. Now, I just want to ask Ian as well, what do we have to have today when we call up? Do I have to know everything I want to do and who I want to leave everything to and all of that?
To be fair, at this stage, if you know your name, your address and your telephone number, that will suffice, yeah. Again, you know, some people might have very, very clear plans and
Yes,
could phone up and,
yes.
and go straight into giving us an instruction, but we don't expect that. We actually hold, for want of a better term, we hold people's hands through the whole process. So we help them through the decision about who's going to look after their affairs, who's going to be the executors. We talk to them about the beneficiaries, we talk to them about gifts, we talk to them about the whole thing. So we don't expect them to know everything now, but what I would say is give us a call, we'll talk you through the whole thing, secure this deal, because it is crazy, it's ridiculously inexpensive, and with a payment plan as well. I mean, we're talking, it breaks out less than £1 a day, you know, so you can afford this, you can look after your family. Don't worry if you don't know exactly what you want to do now. We'll hold your hand through the whole process, and we'll only produce a will for you when you're 100% happy with the instructions that you've given us.
So you give us a little bit of time, which is lovely,
Yeah.
and you have time to think about it. But also, of course, remember the call centres in Leicester. And I love the idea that I think it was Ian said, or Andy said, you know, you can call, or you could drop in. Drop in as well. They're the offices there up in Lincoln, of course, and in Lincoln as well. And they're both of the offices there also. Now, we are going to hear from a satisfied customer. There's nothing like hearing from people who've already used the services of Legacy. So take a look at this. We're going to have a little chat from Stephen Webb. Now, Stephen Webb was so impressed with the service. He says our mortgage advisor recommended us to Legacy Probate Services, and the will and estate planning consultant that dealt with our case was extremely professional, understanding of our situation. We were so impressed with the service received from Legacy that we referred the consultant to my wife's parents. Sadly, my father-in-law passed away recently, but because of the estate planning that Legacy has been put in place, a very sad and stressful time had been made so much easier because of all of his wishes had been taken care of, and Legacy were immediately on hand to help with any queries we had. We have continued to recommend Legacy to family and friends, as we fully appreciate just how important it is to have the right plans in place and also to have the right company to help you. My wife and I cannot praise them enough. So there's a little bit more reading out there for you as well. I mean, that could be you, and that is what's so, so important as well. You've seen the version there from Stephen Webb. Now, let's talk about the benefits of having a will in place, because it's so, so important, isn't it? And we're going to take a look at all of the different benefits you have, starting off, of course, with being able to choose your own executors. Now, you can also choose the age of which your children or grandchildren will inherit. You can name guardians for your children should both parents pass away. Leave specific gifts or legacies to people or charities. Document your funeral wishes, and let people know your organ donation preferences as well. So important. Everything that I've just read there, so important. I've had that experience of being the loved one left behind. I can tell you all of those really do hit a point. Now, if you want to contact the lovely experts in Lincoln or Leicester, it's 0345 520 8000. Don't forget there's a website as well, all the W's, legacywriters.co.uk/TV. And you know they're there until 7 p.m. tonight. Quote Ideal 101. And, of course, they will have a lovely chat with you. And the thing is, as Ian said, you don't have to worry about knowing everything. You don't have to think, oh, I'm going to have to write everything down and work it out. Take your time. Just make the initial call and have a chat. Now, for as little as £21.50 for the will, don't forget those flexible payments, because sometimes if you think, well, you have to sort of pay out an awful lot at once, you don't. It's fantastic prices. You have got a great discount here today, and also those flexi payments also. Now, Helen, we are talking about wills, but there's something else we kind of stopped on a little early, and that was you can add trusts in as well, can't you?
You can, yes. You can add trusts into wills so that these are established after your death. A trust is a vehicle by which you can hold assets for your chosen beneficiaries, and what you do is you appoint trustees to manage those assets. So that's very important, because then those trustees can control when the beneficiaries receive those assets and in what proportions they can be distributed. It can be very important if you own specific assets whereby you want a number of beneficiaries to all receive different interests in that. Yes. So when you're looking at kind of jointly owned assets, like the family home, for example, normally the family home is owned between a couple, and when one of the couple passes away, they will obviously want to ensure that the surviving spouse is well looked after and cared for during their lifetime and be able to stay in that property. But what they will want ultimately is to choose the beneficiaries as to who receives their share of the property. And a trust can be used to do that.
So for homeowners, we're talking about the Protective Property Trust. So if you own your own home, why would you consider that today?
That's exactly right. There's two ways of holding a property as co-owners. The first is as joint tenants, and the second tenants in common. Now, if you're joint tenants, which is how most properties are purchased in the first place, what that means is that when one of you dies, the other automatically inherits their share of the property. So they then own 100% of the property, which may seem on the surface what you would want to happen. But what that does mean is that the surviving party can then decide who inherits that property ultimately, and that might not be the same people that the first person would want to inherit. So tenants in common means that you actually separate that property, so you each own a distinct share. And what that means is you can then leave your share of the property to whoever you want to under the terms of your will.
I see.
Now, the Protective Property Trust ensures that the surviving spouse is looked after during their lifetime, and they have what's called a life interest in the property. But it does mean that it's ring-fenced for the ultimate beneficiaries and can be passed on to them ultimately.
Ian, it's an incredibly popular way of estate planning, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of these problems that occurs not through anyone behaving maliciously, but life moves on. So when one partner dies, or a spouse or a partner dies, life moves on, they meet someone else, they might remarry. What a lot of people don't realise is actually the second you get married, whether there's a will or not, you've actually revoked any previous will. So again, we're back to the rules of intestacy. So we're back to the government will. And unfortunately, if the second survivor, if you like, the spouse or partner that's remarried, they then pass away, then quite often their estate, which is often the family home, moves to the new partner and actually follows their bloodline. So we call it sideways disinheritance, because effectively, whereas the ordinary thing is for couples to want to pass it to each other, as Helen said, and then down to the children equal shares, it actually moves sideways. Not through anyone doing anything malicious, but just through people not being aware and again, not taking advice and not planning. The reason this is so popular is we help avoid that, and we help avoid it a lot.
Absolutely. Do that today.
Yeah, do it today.
Lots of people sitting there now, I think, thinking I need to do this right now, get on the phone. Now, so there is a chance that children may not automatically inherit a property. And we've got something to explain this here for you as well, so just take a look at this.
There are two ways you can own a property in the UK. Most common is joint tenants, where co-owners have an interest in the whole property. If one dies, the surviving partner becomes sole owner. This is Mr. and Mrs. Smith, a married couple who live with their son James in their own house. If Mr. Smith dies, the house passes entirely to Mrs. Smith. This might seem to be appropriate, but let's look at the consequences. Later on, Mrs. Smith meets Mr. Jones, who also has a child of his own. Mrs. Smith marries Mr. Jones, becoming Mrs. Jones. Sadly, Mrs. Jones passes away without making a will. Her entire estate now passes to Mr. Jones under the intestacy rules. And when Mr. Jones passes away, the house follows his bloodline, going to his son. Meaning Mr. Smith's son, James, doesn't inherit anything, something Mr. Smith would not want to happen. But there is a solution. You can own the property as tenants in common. This means Mr. and Mrs. Smith own the house on a 50-50 basis. If one person dies, their half of the house passes into their estate. So if Mr. Smith dies, his share of the property passes into a protective property trust set up by his will. Then James will ultimately inherit his father's share of the property when his mother dies. But Mrs. Smith has full use of the house whilst alive. And if Mrs. Smith marries Mr. Jones, Mr. Smith's share of the property is still held for his son and not passed on to anyone else.
So that, of course, is explaining that sideways disinheritance, which is very interesting. I never knew anything about that. Ian, I'm going to come to you as well, just for me,
okay.
Just in kind of layman's terms. Protective property trust. So how does that work again?
My partner Jeannie and I have got this in our estate planning. And as I said earlier, we've got 2 boys. So if the worst happens to me, Jeannie's younger than me, attractive. No one really knows why she's with me, if I'm brutally honest, but we'll skip over that. What I want to do when I pass away is I want my half of my house to be held in trust for the benefit of Zach and JJ. So they're definitely going to inherit my half of the house.
Right.
But at the same time, I want Jeannie to be able to continue living in the house. So when Helen's talking about this life interest, Jeannie has an interest in that share of my property. So ultimately, life carries on for Jeannie as if nothing's happened. A bit of paperwork changes behind the background, but the reality of what I've achieved is I've ring-fenced my share of the property, so it guarantees that when Jeannie passes away, that my boys inherit. So what you've just seen there about assets moving sideways and going to somebody else's family, I've guaranteed that won't happen to mine. So my boys are going to inherit.
So interesting, isn't it? I don't think lots of us have thought about that. It's sensible planning, Helen, is it? But do you think people are actually aware of their options?
I don't think so. I think it's very difficult for people to take the step and find the time to actually talk about wills. So when you're talking about trust planning, that's another layer on top of that. So it's very important that people talk to us today and can get that information from us.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, of course, you don't need to know everything today and make all your plans today. Don't think you have to sit down with pen and paper now. All you have to do is call the lovely people. Just make that initial chat, just that call first of all. 0345 520 8000. You are saving nearly 40% on a will plus a protective property trust today here on Ideal World. Now, of course, it is lovely to hear from the lovely customers who've already used Legacy. And this is from the lovely Joanne Kane. Now, Joanne Kane, she's very, very happy, of course, with the service. She says Legacy were incredibly professional. She also says that they were helpful throughout the whole process. We were very impressed with their knowledge, and they helped us ensure that a young daughter, Rebecca, will be taken care of if the worst happens. We took advantage of their storage and aftercare facility. That means we don't have to worry about where wills are kept, and this allows us to update them without further charge should our circumstances change. I can highly recommend using Legacy Probate Services to sort out your estate planning needs. So just remind us, Ian, what do we need to do today? Do we have to write down lots of details and have loads of paperwork and names and numbers and everything?
No, absolutely not. Literally, if you don't put this off. If you're thinking about doing this, give us a call now. It doesn't matter if you don't know the first thing about how you want to start, because we'll help you with that process. But phone one of our experts now, phone one of the guys in Leicester. If you're around Lincoln or you're around Leicester, walk into the office and we'll have a chat with you. Yeah. But yeah, just pick up that phone. You don't need to know anything other than your name, your address and your telephone number at this stage, and we'll help you through the rest of it. And as I've said before, we will only produce your documents when you're 100% happy with the instructions that you've given us, because at the end of the day, you tell us what you want and we produce that for you and show you the best way of doing that. So we're reliant on you giving us that information, so you take as little time as possible or as long a time as you need. It's entirely up to you.
Now, we just want to reiterate as well that you can't purchase the protective property separately. It is an inclusion in the will also. Is that right, Ian?
Yeah, as Helen sort of mentioned there, the Protective Property Trust is actually, it's set up when the will is read. So when you first pass away, then the Protective Property Trust, the vehicle for that trust is the will. So unfortunately, it's not something that you can buy on its own. It needs to be in a will. So,
perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much. I want to give you the details, actually, because it's a fantastic deal, isn't it? Take a look at this. Again, you have those discounts there. So if you wanted to go for the will and the Protective Property Trust, which I think is, I never even heard of, you see, this is so important. Full price. Usually, a single person, £358, and couples would be £628. The discounted price, this is incredible, £243.50, and for a couple, £401.50. Now, the Ideal World plus an extra 10% off, so this is when you put both together, brings that down to a super price, £219.15 for a single, and £361.35 for a couple. Now, don't forget, of course, you've got that option of flexi payments as well. So for a single person, it's £73.05, and it's just 3 payments. That's it then, and £120.45. And that, of course, again, is over those 3 payments. It's interest-free. I mean, Ian, I would say flexible option must be such a great help to so many people.
Yeah, if, you know, £120 a month over 3 months, people think about the size of the asset that they're actually protecting, and they think, we're talking about houses, think about what you pay for your buildings and contents insurance. It's probably more than that a year. every year.
True.
And we're talking
Yes.
about this payment being just for 3 months, and you're actually protecting for what a lot of people is their biggest asset, you know.
Absolutely.
So the value for money is exceptional. I think it works out something like £1.32 a day. I know I'm very cheesy with that kind of thing, but if you buy a cup of coffee every day, just don't buy a cup of coffee for 3 months and you can protect your biggest asset.
And that's it after 3 months. It's fully paid. It's done.
Absolutely,
you know?
yeah.
And you can forget about it. It's done. You have... It's a part of life, isn't it? Organising this. That's what it's a part of life. Now, let's have a look at the benefits of a will plus a PBT as well. So you get all the benefits of the will plus, of course, the guarantee of your beneficiaries that they will inherit and share the property, and avoiding that sideways disinheritance. It ensures your spouse or partner can continue to live in the house for the rest of their lives and get a further 10% discount through this exclusive Ideal World offer. That is absolutely incredible. Now, when you call today, you will speak to the lovely people at the call centres, and one of those lovely people is Dan Stevenson. And I think Dan is actually going to speak to us right now from the call centre live here in Ideal World. He's up in Leicester, so you can go and say hello to him. Hello to Dan.
Hi there.
Hello, Dan. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you very much.
Now, how's it going in the call centre?
Yeah, things are great over here. I'm really overwhelmed with how busy we've been. Clients have showed a lot of interest in questions. One of the main questions we seem to be getting is how does this offer compare to the free wills that are offered by banks and unions and other representatives? But like Ian's mentioned earlier on, if anybody does have any questions or wants any further clarity, please do not hesitate to give us a call. That's the reason we are here.
Oh, thank you so much, Dan. Now, Dan, you're there until 7 o'clock tonight as well, so...
Absolutely.
Will you be answering the phones as well?
I might even have a phone call myself, yes, absolutely.
Oh, lovely, and we can always pop in and see you as well up there in Leicester.
Of course.
Thank you so much, Dan. Look forward to talking to you maybe again later on. That question, actually, I'm going to put that to Ian for you as well, because lots of viewers are sort of asking about this. So we're talking about something here that is like a free will. So what's this all about? What's the difference?
Yeah, free wills do exist, or offers of free wills exist. We've seen quite a few of them over the years as well. Sometimes unions offer them, sometimes banks offer them as part of, you know, Premier accounts and that kind of thing. Our experience is they tend to be incredibly basic. They're not very comprehensive. They tend to be incredibly basic. And I think you always have to ask the question, is it genuinely free? And quite often what we find is that there's something called a professional executor named in there as well, which is often the institution that's offered it for free. What that means is when you pass away, the professional that's named as the executor who's going to administer the estate can actually charge a fee. Oh. And that can be quite a high percentage usually of what the estate is worth. Some of the clients that we've seen that have got that type of will aren't even aware that that's in there, so that can be a problem. And of course, I know this is an obvious statement, when you've passed away you can't complain. So unfortunately the family find out that someone else needs to deal with the will, and that money comes out of the estate.
Well, I never knew that. But one thing I do want to ask you, because you are a professional executor, aren't
Correct.
you? So
yeah.
How does that work then?
Well, let me be clear, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a professional executor named in your will. I think where I take issue, and anyone would take issue, is on transparency. If someone's got something that they weren't aware of, that's not great. If we're a professional executor, where it's appropriate, we'll recommend ourselves as a professional executor, but we'll make it clear to the client that what the potential costs of that service would be. We'll make it clear to the client that if we're not needed at the point of need, we'll also renounce, so they don't necessarily have to use us, and then the client can make an informed decision. And for me, that's incredibly important.
It is.
So it's a difference between you've got a choice of using us for all these number of reasons. Sometimes people make wills that are quite contentious, so they don't want to create a problem for a family member that's going to have to tell someone bad news, and the professional's, of course, impartial. We're not emotional, and we know what we're doing, and it's an insured service.
Yes.
So there's value in using a professional, but only when it's transparent and the customer's made an informed decision, not because it's sort of just in there anyway.
Didn't know that. But what if you were... I mean, I've spoken to a lot of people about this show, because it's you know, you don't realise, you know, sort of what you do need to do. But some people have said to me, I already have a will. So what if you already have a will? Do you have to sort of pay to organise that will to be sort of put an end to it and cancelled and then start a new one? How does that work?
No. If you want to make a new will, literally if the new will is written correctly, it'll have what's called a revocation clause in it, and basically that will revoke any previous wills. So effectively the latest will that you do, it has to be signed and witnessed correctly for it to become valid. Once that's in place, any previous wills are basically null and void, for want of a better description. So you don't have to go back to wherever you did your will and cancel it in any shape or form, because by making a new one, you automatically cancel any previous wills.
So the latest one is the one that works.
Correct.
In layman's terms.
The one that works.
The one that works,
yes.
exactly.
Yes.
Now, don't forget, of course, just from £21.50 per month, and that's over 3 payments, of course, you can have that will, and I think it is so, so important. Now, if you want to get in touch, 0345 520 8000, or the website, all the W's, legacywillwriters.co.uk/TV. All you have to do is quote Ideal 101. You can have a look on the website. You can chat to the people like Dan Stevenson up in Leicester as well. So lovely to be able to talk to the people there. And if you want to, and if you're near, well, you can pop in and see them and have a cup of tea as well. Now, we have talked about the Protective Property Services, and we've talked about a will, but there's something I'm very interested in, and this is lasting power of attorney. How does that fit in with everything else, Ian?
I think, you know, it's fairly obvious that the will and the Protective Property Trust, all that comes into effect when you pass away. What we're talking about with the lasting power of attorney is the what if between now and then. We want to plan for the end of our life, but there's also this period between now and then. The lasting power of attorney covers all the horrible stuff that might happen in between. Some people become incapacitated so they can't manage their own affairs, and that can be a huge, huge problem.
Indeed.
Horrible statistics that are out there at the moment. The Alzheimer's Society did a study last year. There's 800,000 people currently suffering with dementia. So there'll be a number of those that won't be able to manage their affairs properly, and so family members have to step in, and that's where a lasting power of attorney can be an absolutely invaluable document, because it allows you to choose someone today that you trust to come in and look after everything that you would normally do for yourself, effectively.
See, that's what happened to my family, and it was an absolute, because they didn't know about this.
Yeah.
So it was an absolute disaster. Not only are you dealing with someone who's not well, but also, you know, whether it's maybe you want to sell the house and move near to where they are in a hospital or something like that. It could be as simple as that, but you can't do that because you haven't got that lasting power of attorney. So I think that is so, so important. How does it work, Helen? We're calling it an LPA to shorten it, lasting power of attorney. How does it work?
Okay, so the lasting power of attorney will appoint someone you know and trust, and that's the vital thing.
Yes,
it's you deciding who can carry out these duties for you. And what it does, when it's registered with the Office of the Public Guardian, it gives them the authority to act on your behalf. So in all your daily activities, if we think about all the people that we speak to on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, from utility providers, phone providers, even just ordering your shopping, dealing with daily bank transactions, claiming benefits, pensions, all that kind of thing. Whenever you try and speak to these companies, they always want to speak to the bill payer or the account holder. If that person is unable to speak to them, they won't speak to anybody else. What this document does is give someone the authority to speak to them. So it makes sure that someone's in place so that they can deal with everything for you. Whether it's for a temporary thing, like if you're in hospital recovering from an operation,
of course,
or whether it's a more permanent thing from an illness or an accident, it's really vital that you get something in place.
So, Ian, what happens if you don't have one of these?
Well, again, when we talk about problems arising on death without a will, they only manifest themselves at that point. This is exactly the same thing. People then suddenly, you know, if a loved one, a spouse or a partner is incapacitated through ill health or an accident or anything like that, they have to deal with all those people, like Helen's just said, that you deal with on a daily basis. I always think about all the people I had to write to when I moved house, all the number of institutions that I deal with.
True.
And so you think about all those people, you've got to deal with those, so how do you do that? Helen's alluded to the fact that you can't speak to these people, so say, well, are you the account holder? No, I'm not. So they won't have anything to do with you, so you need the power to do that. If the person that's become incapacitated hasn't put a lasting power of attorney in place, you have to go through something called a court of protection. That's quite an arduous process. The cost of actually applying to get some power, if you like, to be able to manage their affairs can run into the thousands. And even then it actually comes with some restrictions as well, because you're kind of governed by the court, so you sort of have to ask permission. So it's one of these things that hopefully we're raising awareness today, because it's a problem that exists out there on a massive scale, and there's lots of people having to go through this arduous process and paying out thousands of pounds when, if they'd have planned, it'd cost them very little, and it makes it so much easier for the person, again, that's sort of having to pick up the pieces.
And you think it was just those 3 payments and that would have been done then, you know, really, I've had first-hand experience of that, and it's not a pleasant experience, I can tell you. Let's have a look at the pricing there. We just talked about it there. Let's take a look at all the different prices for you. Now, this is a lasting power of attorney. You can see there, of course, with your discount, and you're spreading the cost to be £69.76. That's for a single person, and for a couple, £139.53. And that is just over those 3 payments. Now, if you wanted this in a will together, which would be a great idea, let's take a look at this, because you've got even further discounts there. You've got a further 10% off as well, bringing that cost per month for 3 months to £82.05 for single, and couples £153.75. And remember, that's over 3 payments and you are done. And Ian, can I ask you, why would you buy the 2 together, the will and the lasting power of attorney?
I could say for the further discount, if I'm honest, but I think if you are sort of, you know, if you plan for the end of your life and you plan for all these eventualities, you look after your family and your loved ones, you've basically put a ring of steel around you and your family. You know, the will take care of everything when you pass away, so your wishes are well known, so people aren't stressing over that. The Protected Property Trust, as we've explained, will actually ring-fence your share of the property and guarantee that it goes to your beneficiaries, which most of the time is children, but it can be anybody. So you've taken care of your biggest asset. And, of course, the lasting power of attorney is that what-if in between now and then.
Yes.
So you really can't do any more. You know, I can say that if you buy a will and a Protected Property Trust at some point in the future, that is definitely going to be used. This is not going to be a waste of money. I hope that actually, in the nicest possible way, a lasting power of attorney is a waste of money, and that you never lose capacity and it's never needs to be used.
Absolutely.
But if it does, it will save the people that are picking up the pieces and having to look after you. It'll save them a massive heartache, it'll save them a lot of time, and it'll save them a lot of money. So again, these are all pretty selfless acts, if I'm honest.
They are indeed selfless acts. That's such a good way of putting it as well. Now, the benefits of having this in place also, well, you get 30% off with having that extra further 10% off when purchased alongside the will. And, of course, you've got the flexi payments options available as well. Seeing all the details there, of course, that we just talked about, even just down to household bills as well. Now, what I think is actually a fabulous deal on this today is all 3 together. So you'd have the will, you'd have the Protected Property Service, and, of course, the lasting power of attorney also. So having all 3 of these together, I think, is so important, and we have got great prices here as well today. Let's take a look at that, actually, putting all 3 together. So this is the full package. Now, I want you to take a look at the third line down, because, first of all, you've got discounted price, then you've got plus an extra 30% off. Now, you can do this over 3 payments at £105.58 for a single, and for a couple it would be £109.21. So that could be you and your partner completely covered, and there are the couple's prices there for you also. You can see there also spreading the cost again, £105.58 and £191.21. Remember, that's just over 3 months, and then you're done, and it's all done for you. Ian, why would you purchase it all? Why would you think people would go for all?
I think just because you never have to revisit it again. Whilst our lives move on and circumstances change, and so you should always keep on top of your will. Like we said about people with existing wills, call in, let's review that, because things do move on. But essentially, I always sort of plan for what would I want to happen if the worst happened yesterday. If a meteorite came down, hit me on the head yesterday, what ideally would I want to happen?
Yes.
And if you're sat at home now and you're not sure, or you're not sure how that's going to happen, if you take advantage of this offer, which quite frankly, these prices are crazy, it is very, very inexpensive and hopefully quite affordable. To be able to have wills, to put everything right when you pass away. So again, it's very difficult, unless you've experienced it, to appreciate the value of someone planning for the end of their life. And if someone's planned for it, it's so much easier for the people that leave behind. If they haven't, they're picking up the pieces at a really distressful time anyway. So having a will takes care of that. The Protected Property Trust, well, quite frankly, I've worked really hard. I've got a mortgage, I'm paying that off, I've got a house. I want to make sure that goes to my children.
Yes, of course.
I don't want that going to anybody else, so that's why I'm doing the Protected Property Trust. I want to ensure that my beneficiaries inherit. Anyone that's worked hard for what they've got,
absolutely,
I want to know that that's going where I want it to go. So that's why you should do the Protected Property Trust. And the lasting power of attorney, again, is just that bit in between. It just covers that eventuality. Plan for the end of your life and then put a bit of an insurance policy with a lasting power of attorney in between now and then, so that you've done everything you possibly can for your family. Because it's your family and it's your loved ones that will be grateful Yeah, because if you're incapacitated, you probably know very little about it. Yeah. And if you passed away, absolutely. I'm pretty sure you'll know very little about it.
It is very, very important, of course, and I think having all of those together is absolutely incredible. Now, I know the call centre is overwhelmed, so do bear with them at the moment. Let's run through the details. Of course, you do want to call 0345 520 8000. Let's look at the price. Now, first of all, we looked at the will. So the will, down with your, of course, your discount there as well of 50% off, £21.50. £31.50, of course, for the couples there. So great, great price there. Now, the will plus, of course, your protective property. Now, let's have a look at this. This mixed together, of course, would be £219.15. We can have a look there as well at the single and, of course, at the couples. Your full price, £358, and couples, £628. That is right down to £73.05 on your first payment, and that's just 3 payments, and £120.45 for couples. That is your first payment of your 3. You don't have to take all of this in. You don't have to be writing it down frantically when the pen won't work and you can't find a bit of paper, so don't worry. The call centre will help you. Now, the lasting power of attorney, when you spread the cost with 3 payments with your further 30% off, £69.76, of course, would be your first payment. There's only 3 payments to make. This isn't every month for years. It's just 3 payments. And couples at £139.53. Now, the will plus your lasting power of attorney, if you want to go for this, which I think is so important, £82.05, that's your first payment. It's just 3 payments. And for couples, £153.75. But don't forget, the best deal has to be the big bundle, as we call it. It's everything. You are completely covered. It's the will. It's a protective property. It is, of course, saving over 50%. You've also got the lasting power of attorney in there as well, and saving over 50%. Incredible value here. We've come to the end of the show. Done very well. They are very, very busy at the call centre, by the way. Good. Ian, I just want to sort of, just in the last couple of minutes, why choose Legacy?
I think, you know, we talked about being part of representative bodies like the Estate Planners Network and the Institute of Professional Will Writers. Choose a company that's been doing it for years, that this is what we specialise in. You know, go to someone that this is what we do every day, day in, day out. We've got over 80,000 satisfied clients. We want to add more to that, obviously. Pick up the phone, speak to one of our advisors, and I think you'll find out instantly why you should use us because of the level of service that we provide. We've built a business on reputation and quality service, and you know, that's why we're offering this to the Ideal World viewers today.
You can speak to the lovely people at the call centre right now. They are very, very busy. They're just up in Leicester, though, so you can pop in and see them if you want to. So they are UK-based, and you go to Lincoln if you like, of course, as well. Helen, another last word from you as well. Why do you think it's important to make sure you have got all of this covered?
I think, as Ian said earlier, it's for the people that you're leaving behind, really. It is a selfless act. It's the best thing you can do for them. Think about it now. It's very easy to sit at home and think,